need a mic to do this, otherwise it is impossible to hear what I say, I'm told. Please allow me to begin by saying how happy I am to be here with all of you today. This summer I am celebrating the 10th anniversary of my life being transformed by Professor Snape, and I cannot think of a better place to be than Ascendio, surrounded by magic, joy, and deeply cherished friends. As Kermit the Frog once sang, there is no such thing as strangers when a stranger says hello. Professor Snape is like the chariot in the major arcana of the tarot, which is all about motion, and yet often shown as stationary. In Shambhala, the sacred path of the warrior, Chugyan Trungpa writes, the warrior fundamentally is someone who is not afraid of space. Cowardice is turning the unconditional into a situation of fear by inventing reference points or conditions of all kinds. But for the warrior, unconditionality does not have to be conditioned or limited. It does not have to be qualified as either positive or negative. It can be just neutral, as it is. He adds that the person who is afraid of the dark and silence, who fills them with ghosts and monsters, is afraid of being outside, of being without reference points. You don't know how to take off your suit of armor, he writes. You have no idea how to conduct yourself without the reference point of your own security. The challenge of warriorship is to step out of the cocoon, to step out into space. Voldemort is a prime example of this fear of open spaces, of a land without boundaries or road signs, where unity does not mean homogeneity. So fearful is he of this apparent void, the loss of his ego-bound identity and ego-boosting classifications, that he literally divided himself into several parts, which he then enclosed in objects whose prestige reassured him about the validity of his beliefs and gave him the reference points he literally could not live without. If we fail to relate to others cooperatively, to engage with our fellows in a manner that results in mutual benefit, we may be tempted to dominate them, and if that does not work, to deny them existence altogether, whether this be by labeling them negatively, using them as a mere disposable resource, or eradicating them. The ego has become a cancer. What seems like growth, like ourself expanding and taking more space, is actually uncontrolled division. Shambhala teaches that we step into space by being brave and at the same time gentle. According to this spiritual tradition, being gentle means exposing your wounds and flesh, your sore points. It means being raw and sharing your heart. You have no reference points. You have placed no warning signs, or upon circumstances or people, you have no planned route. You are open to all. This is what Snape practiced when his final days drew near. It is how he stepped into space. It was a kind of non-movement. He was crushed, reduced to shapelessness. The Tao is the path of letting go, so there will be room to live. Like the central figure in the Rider-Waite tarot illustration of the Chariot, Snape had to learn to let go of the reins to attain victory. It was not the victory he had imagined, but it was much more liberating than what he had in mind. Had he survived Nagini's bites, he could have told the Dark Lord, "The sage does not collect precious things. He brings men back to what they have lost." Professor Snape embodies the totality of the chariot, the immobile vehicle, the charioteer, and the sphinxes. The castle is behind him. The charioteer fights alone. The chariot moves from one plane to the next, water to land and back again, conscious and unconscious, earthly and spiritual. No one can go on the journey for us. Below the charioteer and above the sphinxes, we can observe a depiction of a winged solar disk, red-eyed divinity who wished to destroy Horus, son of Isis. According to E. Walter Maunder's theory, the ancient Egyptian winged solar disk symbol was, in all probability, inspired by ancient observations of total solar eclipses. This would be an excellent way to describe Hera's death, a momentary darkening of the sun. And among the Egyptians, sphinxes were placed at the entrance of the temple to guard the mysteries by warning those who penetrated within that they should conceal a knowledge of it from the uninitiated. After he had viewed Snape's memories, his initiatory message, Harry knew what the inscription on the golden snitch Dumbledore had given him meant, and he prepared himself to enter the Temple of Mysteries in the company of his mother, Lily Isis, protectress of the dead and goddess of children. I open at the close was the inscription. Close can be defined as the end or conclusion, and a place of joining. Harry had already joined with the man he had considered an absolute nemesis, namely Snape. Professor Snape had done the same. Harry had knelt next to Snape, and Snape had reached out and pulled Harry closer. Their eyes met, for once not in confrontation, but in coming together. The charioteer in the Rider-Waite image features lunar crescents on his shoulders. It might be said that Professor Snape, guardian of the knowledge imparted to Harry, was the moon's shadow concealing the sun from Voldemort, who believed that Harry had truly died, and then that the resurrected Harry could nevertheless be defeated because Voldemort thought he was the master of the Elder Wand. Harry's partly hidden sunlight surrounded the dark shadow cast by Snape, wreathing it with spurs of light, a light like molten silver, to borrow words Maunder used to describe a solar eclipse. Perhaps the prophet Malachi makes a reference to this characteristic of the eclipsed sun with its corona like angel's wings when he predicts, "But unto you that fear my name shall the Son of Righteousness arise with healing in his wings." During Professor Snape's ultimate exchange with Harry, the former was once again sprawled on the ground, and we read that after Snape stopped breathing, Harry remained kneeling at Snape's side, simply staring down at him. There must have been something oddly impressive about him, an unexpected grace, for when Harry raced to the headmaster's office, the password he blurted out was Dumbledore, even though he still did not know what the vial he was clutching in his hand revealed. Dumbledore, who had always trusted Snape, maybe had been right to do so. However, his friend was deserted. Even then, Dumbledore would not reveal Snape's secrets. Professor Snape, having shown his Patronus to Harry, would now lay bare its source, its roots within himself. It was his prerogative and his fruition. Harry had, time and again, believed that Professor Snape's intentions were insidious, but he did not discard the vial and its contents, which would have once been immediately viewed as poison. It was without hesitating that he dove into the blessed relief of Snape's thoughts, as though this would assuage his torturing grief. He had not known why Snape's lifeless form had caused him to linger. It could well have been because of feelings similar to those he had experienced in the presence of the silver doe. She had filled him with wonder, not at her strangeness, but at her inexplicable familiarity. Professor Snape could not entice Harry into an ambush. Harry plunged into the water to retrieve the Sword of Gryffindor. He approached the dying headmaster, drawn to him by irresistible force. He ran into the headmaster's office, and upon seeing Dumbledore's empty frame, turned his back on it. He plunged into the pensive. It was Snape he had run to, and Snape was waiting for him. The very device in which Professor Snape had once hidden his worst and his best, the circular pensive, had become a gateway to his essence. He was a person who had been mysterious, inexplicable, unexpected, and finally familiar. He had given Harry some of his most intimate, heartfelt, humiliating, joyous, painful, and noble moments. All of his debris, all of his treasures. warriorship and the first principle of Shambhala vision is not being afraid of who you are. Ultimately, that is the definition of bravery, not being afraid of yourself. He was truly the bravest when he shared the totality of his being, moving beyond his contradictions, like the chariot affecting a union of opposites represented by the black and white sphinxes, one looking to the left, the other to the right, but headed in a single direction under the guidance of the charioteer. He was at the center. He had always been at the center, although as time advanced, his in-between position became even more central. He was shadow and light, a professor who was ignorant, a killer who preserved life, a protector who pointed towards danger, a lover who was alone. As it is written in the Tao Te Ching, the path into the light seems dark. The path forward seems to go back. The direct way seems long. True power seems weak. True purity seems tarnished. True steadfastness seems changeable. True clarity seems obscure. The greatest love seems indifferent. The Tao is nowhere to be found, yet it nourishes and completes all things. He was the hanged man who, in Rachel Pollack's words, by reversing his own sense of values, has turned the world on its head. Immediately following Professor Snape's memory of being hung upside down by James Potter, an incident that was the genesis of his slow metamorphosis, we see him falling again, abruptly coming to his knees in front of Dumbledore, who asks him, "Well, Severus, what message does Lord Voldemort have for me?" No message. I'm here on my own account." Snape was wringing his hands. He looked a little mad, with his straggling black hair flying around him. I come with a warning, no, a request, please." Dumbledore flicked his wand. The leaves and branches still flew through the night air around them. Silence fell on the spot where he and Snape faced each other. What request could a Death Eater make of me? Snape is on high, on a hill high up, and is being asked existential questions. He is asked to reflect on the nature of who he truly is. Are you owned by someone? Do you want to consume others? Are you a Death Eater? Is effectively what Dumbledore is asking, making Snape aware that his very presence on top of that hill, his having waited for the headmaster, cast the young man's identity as a Death Eater into doubt. Snape's cues are about to be blown down like a house being ripped to pieces by a strong wind. Is he ready to face his fear? To embrace the freedom implicit in his actions and words? I'm here on my own account. He was giving voice to a frightening admission. I'm here on my own. He was taking responsibility for himself, standing as a person capable of uniting himself to others, that is, as a whole person. Not as someone in need of external validation, but as someone who was taking the first step towards the recognition of his own fundamental worth. This was not easy. He was caught in a storm of emotions and looking, Rowling tells us through Harry's eyes, a little mad. The first time he was turned upside down, he could not quite figure out who he was and preferred to repress the vision he had had of what love meant. I didn't mean, he repeated to Lily, and had struggled on the verge of speech. Now before Dumbledore, he would share those words that made him suffer, the words he had meant. I'm here on my own. The moment he said those words, Dumbledore surrounded him with silence, shielding Snape's vulnerability. Dumbledore then asked him what it was that he wanted. Is what you want something I can give you? Professor Snape had already asked Voldemort to spare Lily for mercy for the mother in exchange for the son. He had asked to have her. Evidently, he came to the conclusion that he could not in fact have her, that she would not see herself as an object, dissociated from her unitive, loving relation to her son. She was ready to be on her own, to give herself up rather than sever herself from Harry existentially by using him. Her love for him was not possessive. Being without him was preferable to her than seeing him treated like an item of ownership having exchange value. That was when Snape himself realized that he would rather be without her than see her treated in the same manner as a kind of asset. He confessed that he had been tempted to see her as such, but that he knew she was not. It was then that he glimpsed the best of himself, which gave him the strength to love. What did he want? Hide them all, he told Dumbledore. Keep them safe. Unsurprisingly, the revelations continue, each more intense than the last, and the upside-down world he is beholding hands him the child he had once been prepared to discard. Who are you, this world is asking him. Professor Snape not only has the strength to protect this child from Voldemort, but to ask Dumbledore for something in return, for something which he knows Dumbledore can give him, love and freedom. Never tell Dumbledore. If you insist, Dumbledore replies with a sigh. Although Snape has glimpsed at his true nature, it still alarms him. The implication of his decision overwhelms him. The vision of love is dizzying, almost strange, formidable, even absurd. It looks like a hallucination. Professor Snape is actually not far off. In Order of the Phoenix, we read that Ron said something sagely during yet another argument between Ron, Harry, and Hermione about Snape's loyalties. I am much inclined to agree with Rowling's narration qualifying Ron's words as wise. His statement, at first glance, appears negative, but as Dumbledore once told Snape, we see what we expect to see. Or as the Dalai Lama puts it, there are many discrepancies between the way things appear and the way they really are. Ron's insightful words were, poisonous toadstools don't change their spots. The Master of Potions is indeed a poisonous toadstool, an inducer of visions, a doorway to mystical experience. The rabbit who himself falls down the hole to Wonderland and subsequently leads Harry there as well. Professor Snape is a figurative Amanita muscaria, a magic mushroom. The Amanita muscaria is bright red and dotted with white spots. Its first growth stage is similar to an egg shape, giving the mushroom its bulbous base. It also appears that this mushroom has been born from a tiny pot or cauldron. In the final stages of development, the Amanita muscaria mushroom, which takes root at the foot of the sacred conifer, also known as Christmas tree, will continue to grow upward, flattening itself into a small table. One may wish to keep in mind, the authors of astrotheology and shamanism add, that the Knights of the Round Table were the keepers and protectors of the Holy Grail. From the table stage of the mushroom, the cap continues to upturn and becomes like a cup or a chalice which holds the morning dew. When the morning dew collects in the cup of the upturned mushroom cap, some of the psychedelic substances are drawn out of the mushroom and into the water. Consequently, the water is colored red like blood. The bright red pigment originates in the mushroom's cap and bleeds into the water. This will fade the mushroom from a bright red into an orange or golden cup. Although the psychedelic effects would not be as intense as a belly full of mushrooms, one could literally take this golden, chalice-shaped mushroom from nature and drink from the Holy Grail. When Professor Snape recited his famous speech at the beginning of Harry's first potions class, he concluded his monologue by saying that he could teach them to stopper death, put an end to death. He was the chalice of knowledge, the goblet of fire containing the bittersweet liquid from which Harry drank and which turned Harry's own world upside down in the most radical way imaginable. Harry drank what might have been poisonous had it not been brewed by a master. However, Snape showed him that the one who lives in accordance with the message of love will never see death. Paradoxically, the one who is willing to stand alone, to lose his footing, to be suspended, stretched, is the one who is extended beyond himself, who sees the full kaleidoscope of reality, a vision so astounding it ensnares the senses, and who is never alone. As he lay before Harry, Professor Snape exercised his freedom. He acted from his higher self and made a true choice. What he saw, he wanted to see. Having drunk from the Holy Grail, after protecting as devotedly as Sir Galahad, he asked Harry, "Look at me." An alchemical reaction took place inside of him, and he offered up a chalice filled with a mixture of water and wine. Rowling tells us that Harry, who had always seen Snape's eyes as similar to black tunnels void of any warmth, saw something in the depths of the black pear. Professor Snape had seen more, not one or the other, not both, but a part of both, not Lily Evans' son, but Lily Potter's son. Then he too proved to be the same as Harry. Like a ripe fruit that had fallen from a tree and fermented on the ground, Snape had yielded his essence, which gushed from him and was placed in a receptacle. Harry took the substance that had poured from Snape's widened eyes, brought it to the headmaster's circular office, emptied the crystal flask into the circular pensive. Harry saw more. He saw love. He saw a man who had loved all of his life. Professor Snape and Harry had become intoxicated by this union of seeming opposites, and both saw the truth as they lay upon the floor, overcome by a vision so fierce it knocked them off their feet. During his last moments, Professor Snape experienced a state of indescribable harmony. He was the hanged man who is like a babe in the womb when it turns upside down so that it may be born hanging, as it were, from its umbilical cord. He allowed himself to be lowered into those deep waters, floating there, absorbing all they could offer him. He is waiting for that moment when he will be born into a new consciousness. It could be said that this birth was ushered by Neville Longbottom, who severed the umbilical cord, who beheaded Nagini prior to Harry's proclamation before all present in the Great Hall, as he and Voldemort circled each other. Behold Severus Snape, newborn servant of love. Since my path crossed Professor Snape's, if I may put it that way, his story and influence have engendered a succession of mystical experiences within my own being. I can say that he has been the equivalent of a cup-shaped Amanita muscaria filled with entheogenic substances. Time and time again, his example has given me the courage to withstand the force and ramifications of my questions and evolving beliefs. Very shortly after Voldemort told Lucius Malfoy, "Go and fetch Snape," in other words, not long before Professor Snape's death, we read that Harry, now aware of Voldemort's location, makes his way to the Shrieking Shack, accompanied by Ron and Hermione. Harry, Ron, and Hermione sped down the marble staircase. Glass shattered to their left, and the Slytherin hourglass that had recorded house points spilled its emeralds everywhere, so that people slipped and staggered as they ran. It is another paradox that to know balance, one must first lose one's balance. Nothing affects loss and increase as fruitfully and wholly as love. Coincidentally enough, the highly valued emerald was prized by the ancients as the symbol of love and rebirth. Of additional interest is the way these precious gems are cared for to this day. Fissures and fractures that are characteristic of emerald are traditionally filled with oil to minimize their visual impact. Emerald is known as the stone of successful love. It helps bring awareness of the unknown to conscious recognition, imparting reason and wisdom. Pliny the Elder remarked that if the sight has been wearied or dimmed by intensely looking at any other object, it is refreshed and restored by gazing upon this stone. mythological conditions. Logically enough, a genesis as turbulent as that of the emerald impedes the undisturbed formation of large, flawless crystals. For this reason, it is only seldom that a large emerald with good color and good transparency is found. But for the very reason that the emerald has such a stormy past, it is surely entitled to show it. Whilst its good hardness protects the emerald to a large extent from scratches, its brittleness and its many fissures can make cutting, setting, and cleaning rather difficult. The green treasures react very sensitively to inappropriate treatment. Professor Snape, headmaster of love, was just such a rare green treasure, fashioned from cavities filled with fluid, hard yet brittle, clear yet riddled with cracks, stormy yet a symbol of love. He renews the sight of those whose eyes had grown tired and grants prophetic vision. In his beautiful commentary to the Gospel of Judas, Jean-Yves Le writes, "The important thing is to discover the I am. Whether it appears as the ocean, or as a tree with fathomless roots, whether it moves as the wings of a bird, or opens as the eyelashes of the one who looks into our eyes." When Harry and Professor Snape experienced interconnectedness, life, death, the past, the future, all of these were between them, fluctuating like the amorphous bubbles in a lava lamp, and then dissolving. It was like when Harry looked into Dumbledore's pensive for the first time. Dumbledore placed his long hands on either side of the pensive and swirled it, rather as a gold prospector would swirl for fragments of gold. And Harry saw his own face change smoothly into Snape's. Harry had seen Snape's most poignant memories when he stood before Voldemort in the ruined Great Hall, surrounded by students and teachers. The memories that had pierced the fallen headmaster and finally allowed a glimpse of the foundational mystery of his existence. The vignettes of his life had left holes that I would like to compare to the decorative openings of Borobadur's bell-shaped stupas, inside of which are seated statues of the Buddha. Simply put, a stupa is a sacred structure that promotes balance and is crowned with a twin symbol uniting sun and moon. To gaze upon a stupa, symbolic of the body of the awakened one, is to experience the mind of the Buddha. That moment of direct insight, no matter how brief, is the gateway to enlightenment. And I will conclude with this last paragraph. I'm stopping my yapping now. The world card indicates a person who owns little. The whole world is their home and gives them what they need. This is the world that Professor Snape has given me. His example was like an emerald pressed against my heart, and it re-emphasized love as the measure of all things, as the very nature of reality to me. This unconditional love triumphed over every division, although the victory was one that highlighted a union of opposites and not rejection. Because love is anything. And that's all. Thank you very much. What I just said is actually an excerpt from my latest book, and if anyone wants one, I'll be sitting outside with a pile and like that.